They do record all the time.
Yeah, so just, be careful what you say.
So, so that we can get this on the recording, go ahead and please use the microphones if you're not in this general vicinity, especially on that end, to discuss things. Welcome everybody to another wonderful day. We're Senate Bill 16197 statutory work group and the subgroups. We're going to go ahead and start off with the 3.2 beer subgroup, but before we do that, we will hold on for a second. I'll get it. Oh, we're getting there. I'm trying to log in here. Awesome. So before we start, we're going around the room. Everybody introduce your name and who you're with. I'm Patrick Carmoni, Liquor Enforcement Division Director, and we'll go to my right.
Linda Atkins, the Attorney General's Office.
I'm Danya Amick. I'm with the Liquor Enforcement Division.
Jay Klaus, Liquor Enforcement.
Stuart Wrestler, Aviation Club, Colorado.
Lisa McCann, I'm a consultant, I'll be writing the report on the statutory work group.
Despite what this says, I'm Matt Hastings. I'm with the Policy Advisor with the Governor's Office.
Kristen Thompson, Natural Grocers.
Amber Valdez, Miller Coors.
Kevin Bomber, Municipal League.
Michael Steppett, Wine and Spirit Wholesalers of Colorado.
I'm Mackenzie Ramus, not Lloyd, and I'm sitting in for Target.
Adam Stapin, Liquor Attorney.
Soul Mailer, Colorado License Beverage Association.
Stephanie Benson, Dominique.
Vancouver, Colorado Restaurant Association.
Garrett Forsman, Anheuser-Busch. Joanna Green, Distilled Spirits Council.
Scott Chase, Colorado Super Safety.
Doug Caskey, Colorado Wine Industry Development Board.
Chetan Burke, Crooked Stave.
Mike Laszlo, Laszlo Law, I'm here as an independent. Patrick Thomas, Total Liquor.
Bruce Gerking, Hazel's Beverage World Boulder.
Gene McAvoy, Colorado Licensed Beverage Association.
Louis Koski, Department of Revenue.
Ron Cambersell, Department of Revenue.
We got one in the back there.
Larry Hudson, Safeway.
And
Sandra Lohman, Liquor Enforcement.
all right. If you haven't done so, please make sure you sign up so we can have you on the record as being here today. So we scheduled these meetings starting at 8 o'clock, doing the three different subgroups at 8, 10, and then 1. We'll have a lunch break on your own at 12. And then the subgroup will meet at 3, or the main working group will meet at 3. So you're welcome to stay for all, none, 1, 2, however you want to do. The last meeting we had, we sort of went over the 3.2 beer subgroup. Did everybody get a copy of the minutes that we posted on the internet? Make sure that we post that soon after. I don't think we sent them out necessarily, but they got posted on our website. If any questions about that, let me know. Well, we came, several things were in discussion, and I'm actually opening back up to the floor to see what any progress was made throughout the industry. And we had, a lot of discussion on the 3.2 issue concerning the January 1st, 2019 date and what that means, what it doesn't mean, and the task was to, between the last meeting and now, to meet and amongst the industry to try to find how we can come up with some compromises. I know we have two different camps here as far as what that looks like, so I really open the board to see, open up to the floor to see what ideas and progress that we made. Don't everybody speak first? Gene
McAvoy, CLBA. I think there are some significant parties missing at the table, and I don't know, I haven't heard from any of those, but I would like to once again remind the subgroup of what the legislation calls for. And it says that that this group via LED will come up with an implementation plan whereby 3.2 licensees may apply for a license to sell full-strength beer. And I'm paraphrasing, but I think that that's one of the things that I would like to see some progress made on, is that we really begin to have a discussion about what that plan might look like. And I would be remiss to my members if I did not add that if we would have never, ever gone to the table to compromise had the issue of an automatic conversion been put on the table. That was never part of the discussion amongst those that we negotiated with. And historically, we have some commitments from the 3.2 licensees to do just that, sit down and develop that implementation plan.
Okay.
I have a question. Mike
Yes.
Laszlo here. After our discussion last month, I was thinking about a question I had posed to the Department of Revenue maybe a few months ago about whether or not the addition of coolers or different types of coolers in a retail liquor store constituted a permanent modification of premises, and I was told that it did. If convenience stores want to expand coolers, and that would make a permanent modification, could that be a way of looking at the licensing a different way? And maybe this has already been discussed.
So, and how would that fit into the 3.2 issue as far as?
Well, that's part of the issues, right? If they get the automatic conversion, there's a lot of discussion over the expansion. They not become convenience, they become beer stores as opposed to just convenience stores. But for them to expand their coolers to become beer stores, it'd be a permanent modification. Is that kind of part of the issue here?
Well, it could. I mean, are you seeing some kind of a mandate to make them expand to do that, or?
No, they would, if they wanted to expand it, and that's the concern I was hearing last time, was that they would expand. So maybe they have 2 coolers now for 3.2 beer. And maybe I'm wrong here, maybe the concern isn't the expansion. It seemed to me that was the case. If they expanded from 2 coolers to 20 coolers, that seemed to be the real concern. Is that not the case, Bruce?
Well, I don't know, Gene, you want to answer that as far as your concern on that?
I'm gonna
And my friend Mike actually asked me the question, so I'll try to answer it. I think it's broader than that. I mean, that's would be not stating the whole issue. And I think, it seems to me that maybe, the first meeting or two were sort of orientation meetings in some way, and there wasn't a huge amount of progress being made. And, the suggestion, Patrick's suggestion about, industry participants needing to meet outside this room is probably right to make real progress, because this group is too big. It's unwieldy. And in addition to people who are appointed to the group, then it's also there are other folks who are interested in attending these meetings. And I think as we saw even with SB 197, we didn't make any progress when there were 50 people and reporters in the room. We made progress when a few people got into a room and could start to really get down to it. So that's probably what's going to have to happen, and it might make sense to think about what's useful to do in this type of a setting, what actually can happen, and progress that might be able to be made. Maybe it's just people stating their general views of the issues, and then we have to sit down and do the hard work separately. But from my perspective, we've been off on a little bit of a red herring with this whole conversation about automatic conversion, et cetera, et cetera. And that certainly was not the intention of the legislature, and I don't believe there's any possibility that that's going to happen. Either we'll come up with some sort of recommendation of a process as the bill calls for that the legislature can consider, or the legislature will take some action on its own, because there are just too many problems and too many public safety and other concerns that would be encountered if we to have that sort of kind of sudden overnight change. So hopefully there is a common ground and a consensus where we can all get to something that's reasonable and makes sense and is within the intentions of the bill. But I think it's a large, complicated, multifaceted issue, and it's not going to be solved easily, and it's not just down to one or two minor points like whether or not additional coolers can be installed.
I guess I'll take a counter position to that, maybe. I think the legislature wanted an open discussion from all parties deciding what would be best for the industry in the state of Colorado, and for not to be concluded and conducted in a behind-the-scenes 11th hour type of manner that Senate Bill 197 was. I was not there. I have no stake as a lobbyist or otherwise within that. I just think that the legislature came out and said, let's have an open discussion from all the stakeholders to figure out what the industry does or does not want and what's best for the state, knowing that there are going to be adverse discussions occurring in the open with full disclosure. So with that said, I think the more we can get done here, then I agree with Patrick that I think the major players need to discuss, but then they need to come back to the work group and vet those discussions and put that on the table.
Yeah, because the recommendation is coming from the working group. The members of the working group will vote, and the group that's meeting at 3 o'clock is the actual main working group that was set by statute, and that group is the one that's going to make recommendations for the report. The subgroups were opened up to include anybody because we don't want to exclude anybody from that process, but ultimately it's a working group's decision on what the report's going to say. Whether it's divided, whether it's consensus, whether it's unanimous, whatever it is, the report is going to be what it is. And I agree to some degree, a lot of the issues really not going to be hashed out with 30, 40 people. It's just too many people to get something done. But at the same time, those have to be discussed openly through here. I mean, once if a decision or maybe not wasn't made, that they have to come through this group to be able to have full disclosure on what that looks like. And you can read into the legislative intent all you want to. We have both, two ideas of what that intent was. The fact is, we have what we have, and we need to get forward somehow in a compromise to figure out what a process looks like. And that can be, a process could be an automatic conversion. I'm just saying that, I'm talking about just hypotheticals. A process could be a full-blown application process where you have needs and desires. It can be from A to Z, Kevin.
I know that there was some disagreement on this last time, but to the extent that I think someone mentioned that automatic conversion is kind of a red herring. I don't know that it's red herring. I just think it's inaccurate because, and this is a fault in the way that 197 was worded. I wasn't a part of that, so maybe I would have suggested something different. But the way
There was an additional issue that this group did not talk about, because can't think of everything all at once, right? From the division standpoint, and open it up to especially liqueurs and other brewers, is what happens January 1st, 2019 with the manufacture process. And we've all discussed retail here, that's what we've been focused on, but we'd be remiss if we'd miss the manufacture process. So now, right now, the way it is an entity that wants to make both for malt beverage and malt liquor have to have two separate licenses. One that gives them the ability to make 3.2, one makes more than 3.2. They are separate licenses. They have separate warehousing areas because they're different products. Do we need to take a look at that process to where they'll actually be making the same thing at the same place? Do we need two separate licenses? So something was brought up internally within our staff that I guess we never thought about until about a month ago. So that's another thing I want to bring to the table of just having discussion with that, because it would seem pointless to have two separate licenses to make the same exact item. I mean, totally a pointless red tape bureaucracy that does not need to be there. But you'd have to have some kind of a law change, because come January 1st of 19, it is still true for malt beverage. You're selling for malt beverage as a retailer, or you're selling malt liquor, depending on what license you have. You know they're the same product, so that has to be looked at as well. So maybe it's a combined for malt beverage malt liquor, or it's the one manufacturer license has the ability to do both with the same one license. And I'm all these different possibilities out there, but I open that up to this group as well. And same for wholesale. There's a 3.2 separate wholesale license as well. There's stovepipes. You have malt liquor and you got 3.2 from the top to the bottom. So this isn't just on a retail issue. It's a manufacturer and wholesale issue as well.
And I'm new, I'm sorry, and I've been following along on the side. But does that mean that you would need to change, is it 46 into 47, and doesn't that have a whole new can of worms? And if you've already gone through that, like, Gene can take me to the outside and tell me.
Well, it's not necessarily changing 46. There's several ways to, quote, skin that cat to be able to make that happen. But I guess my thought would be, from a regulation standpoint, I don't see the need to have two separate manufacturer and wholesale licenses to make the same product. How that looks and what article you put it in the law, there's better ways to do it than others, but there's more than one way to do that. I'm going to talk about the concept here. Initially, the concept, what's the group's thought of, having two separate licenses for the same product?
On wholesale.
And manufacturer.
On the manufacturer.
Both manufacturer, because
Not on retail.
Yeah, well, that all dovetails into that, okay? But I'm just bringing the table. Let's not forget about the top two tiers.
Catching up quickly.
I mean, you can make a single license. It's a beer manufacturer license, and with that license, you can make product ABC that's defined either as a fermented malt beverage or malt liquor. So you still can sell it to the convenience store as a fermented malt beverage, and to the retail liquor stores as a malt liquor. I mean, but I'd like to get it to one license, because why have separate licenses, separate fees? It doesn't make any sense. And that's something this group has not focused on, because we're looking at retail, which of course we need to do that as well. Has anyone had the opportunity outside here to have discussions amongst each other, especially of the ones that don't agree, making some headway of, I know there's two different camps here. One is nothing really needs to change a whole lot, and the process is, the quote process is just it happens. And the other camp is there needs to be an application process, potentially with needs and desires, and with, those are the two that I know camps. Kevin.
Well, I can tell you some conversations that I've been able to have from within my membership on the local licensing piece of it. One is that there is little to no desire to have everyone who's got a
is there any issue for new licenses, especially with your on-premises consumption licenses?
So, what do you mean? Sorry.
Like potentially having a facility that's on premises, it's fermented malt beverage, so it's full malt liquor, it's everything.
Yeah.
You know, no wine and spirits, but all beer, and it's an on-premises bar,
Yeah.
beer bar. Is there any issue with that, wanting to have any kind of additional regulations beyond 46?
Well, I mean, part of what I think, at least the proposal that's still not quite fleshed out yet that we have is to move all this to Article 47 in the first place.
Did you do what?
Move all this to Article 47 in the first place. So it's because you're essentially taking a license that was selling a product that was different and now making it the same as everyone else. So why is it going to be in a different article and treated differently? So I think part of your question is, so for new licenses, anyone applying for something new, no matter whether it was on-premise or off-premise, they would have a needs and desires review, and there would be a distance restriction considered. But I think for anyone, at least at this point, I'm not willing to say this is a final position, but at this point, anyone who's got a license and the rules have changed should not necessarily threaten their overall business. And I think I heard that pretty loud and clear in a different vein a few years ago from some of the retail folks who were worried about what beer might do to their businesses and if they were able to sell. Well, that ship sailed now. But so I don't know about the latter part about that. The other thing that is still out there is whether or not it should be included in any kind of new concentration determination. That's probably a future discussion as well. So I don't know if I answered your
No, you did. The question was,
the on-premise ones are so few in the first place,
well,
right?
under the current model.
Yeah. Well, but if there's a new license, yeah, they're absolutely gonna have to go through needs and desires.
Well, I know that, but I mean, my question really is bearing on the distance restriction.
Yeah, well, that's why that's what I'm saying. Part of any proposals when we treat them like any retail liquor store license or anyone else selling full strength anything.
So, from your viewpoint, from the municipal league, that existing licenses should be able to have that license and not be jeopardized solely based upon 197.
Yeah, with the caveat that I think those that would the conversation still has to be completed at our level on those that would fall within a distance limitation that where it doesn't currently apply because they're in Article 46 right now.
Right.
I still think that there would not be a lot of significant interest in taking away someone's liquor license, particularly if it's essentially beer only.
Okay. We're getting warmed up. Keep on going.
I guess follow up on that. Is the distance restriction from a school, or is it the new 1,500-foot restriction for off-premise sales?
No, it's the same language that's in statute now for schools, churches,
Okay.
Et cetera, that can be reduced or eliminated at the local level. And if they've already reduced or eliminated it for other licenses, then they would have to go in and affirmatively do it if there was a new type of license that was subject to the distance restriction, but that would probably follow.
All right, and one thing you always need to be aware of, if at any point along the line you change the name of fermented malt beverage to anything else, or like to malt liquor, current law would then kick into where that 1,500-foot distance restriction would apply. Because that 1,500-foot distance restriction applies to outlets that are licensed to retail to sell malt liquor, wine and spirits. So If you have an off-premises that does sell just malt liquor, that is subject to 1,500 foot distance requirement. For minimum beverages, not. So just keep that in mind. Moving into Article 47, you can do that. And I think that the logic would flow, you call it malt liquor, but you really can't do that unless you change the law as far as the distance requirement. Or you put say hypothetically, what's that?
You could put a grandfather clause.
Put a grandfather clause. You can say this kind of store is not subject to it. You can say a lot of things, but you keep all those little technical issues in mind because it's not an easy just switch. Me from convenience stores, willing to chime in?
Keep it way inside.
Patrick, we've been talking about, I worked with Greer a little bit, we had a conference call, they're trying to poll the members as it relates to some of the questions I think that he was tasked to answer, and I think you're waiting for some of the final answers to come back, but initially, I think the questions that were asked were about the distance requirement and about the conversion. I don't have the exact answers from that, and I'm not sure if I'm here this month, but I think it's, so I'll get those, and I'll get those, all of them sent to you.
From the last meeting, from the minutes, we had 10 bullet points that we came away from the discussion. Now let's just quickly, I'll read those here real quick. For those of you who may not have the minutes, that may spur more discussion because I don't want to let anything drop here. Is this as simple as changing 3.2 definition? There was much discussion about having an application process or just allowing conversions. There's several different thoughts. Do we combine Article 46 and 47? How will this affect retail liquor stores with the distance requirement? Do we create a new business type? Will current 3.2 license have to apply or automatically be reissued? Neighborhood needs and desires, 500 foot distance, grandfathered or not? What about 3.2 beer in parks? That's my issue. From public safety, public consumption. I will still continue to, I will bring a recommendation to, or at least discussion on what that might look like in the future. Because I do believe we need to do something about that. I'm not opposed to, I don't want to change status quo of taking away public consumption where it's allowed today with products it's allowed with, but to open it up is not in either not my, but the division's public policy or public safety best interest. Will each license type be willing to give up a little to meet consensus? Do we get rid of 3.2 on-off present license types? Is it this group's goal to allow those who currently have a 3.2 license to keep it in some fashion or not come January of 19? So those are the bullet points we came away from from last meeting.
I'm sorry, Patrick, where were the minutes located on the website?
Under the working group tab, if you go to Senate Bill 16197, the big blue button about right in the middle of the page.
Yeah, then this is from October 13th.
Yep. Sandra can show you.
Okay, I see what you're reading. Thank you.
Gene.
It might be helpful, and I don't know whether you can get this through I may get this acronym wrong, the National Association of Beverage Control, something. How do other states handle beer sales in grocery and convenience stores? Is it different than package or liquor stores? Or I think, are there models that we could look at? I just think there's a lot more information out there than we've had on the table at some point for discussion. Because although I respect Kevin and CML's position, but I also think that the definitions have changed, but the products are different. And everybody at the table knows that. A 3.2 fermented malt beverage isn't a 25% alcoholic malt liquor. And for anyone to be able to sell that 25% ABV product, they ought to have to meet the same requirements that are currently in statute for current resellers of those products. I just think that we've got to look at the product as well as the seller. And if there's anything that we could bring to the table from another state, might be pretty helpful.
Gene, what would we wanna bring from another state in terms of what municipalities do with?
Yeah, what are the rules and regulations or restrictions, if any, on the sales of malt liquor that we have described as fermented malt beverage?
So basically what exists everywhere else?
Yes.
When we do business, we do business in 11 states, and other than dry counties in Arkansas and some weird places in Wyoming and things like that, most of it's left up to the locals for zoning. Anything more restricted than that stays with the state. So basically, 500 feet from school, or you'll have distances from other liquor stores, like 150 feet or 250 feet or something like that. But for the most part, it's just a distance requirement, or you can't have beer or wine or liquor in this zoning classification.
Well, just based upon an hour or two on the internet, I see several different types of regulatory schemes, whether it's no self-checkout, there's a limit on ABV, there's a limit on the size of the item that can be sold, it can be hot, it can be cold, no single serves. I mean, so I think there is a variety of things that could be discussed, whether we want to or not, but just to say that flip the switch, you're now selling 25% ABV in a convenience store right next to a school is just not good public policy.
I don't think I would disagree with that.
But I guarantee you that if that's a public safety, public policy issue, the schools and municipalities can and will be more concerned about it than anyone.
Right. I'm not saying they wouldn't.
And I'm just not hearing it yet, Gene.
Respectfully, I talked to some folks in Boulder just because I was curious, and my sense was there's actually a pretty low level of understanding about what SB 197 was, even among the people appointed to the Boulder Liquor Licensing Authority. And the beer conversion coming in some form or fashion in 2019 was news to those people. So at this point, I suspect that there are a lot of people who will be interested who just aren't aware of some of the issues that are out there. I think a lot of people maybe don't completely understand what malt liquor is as well. In the SB 197 conversations, there was a lot of talk about, well, from 3-2 licensees, about we want to be able to sell real beer because our customers don't want to buy 3-2 beer, they want to buy real beer. And if you take a 3-2 Coors Light and a real Coors Light, the ABV on a real Coors Light is 4.2. So if that's what we're talking about, that's not such a sea change. But if you want to take the universe of malt liquor and you want to understand what that really is and the safety implications, and when people start looking at alcoholic soda pop, alcoholic Gatorade, alcoholic iced tea, very high alcohol beers that are intended to get you drunk quickly for a very low cost, and thinking about having those sold in relatively low regulated environments where children work, where children shop, I personally believe that many of our communities and elected officials are going to have concerns about that. Whether or not the local licensing clerks are expressing those concerns at this point or not.
During the last meeting also, there was a request for some statistical data, and so I brought numbers as far as number of licenses, and I'm not gonna read the whole list, but was any specific desire to know how many licenses we have of a certain type?
Why don't you read off the 3-2?
tell you on the 3-2, we have over 1,500 3-2 retail beer. That includes on-premises and off-premises and on-off, all combined. So it's 1,564 of the 3-2 retail licenses. Our retail liquor store is 1,617.
What was that number again?
Retail liquor store, 1,617. I do have it broken up into the three different kind of 3-2s in city or county, but really the 1,564 is what you're looking at, and covers all the convenience stores, the grocery stores, your on-offs, which is just a few of those.
Can we have the numbers for those subcategories?
Sure. Three-two beer off premises city is $12.69.
Whoops, sorry, Patrick, what was the last word? 3-2 off premises.
City. 3-2 off premise county, $190. So that's again $12.69 for city, 3-2 off premise only, $190 for off premises in the county. Your on premise only licenses for 3-2, 44 for the city, 7 for the county. Again, 3-2 on only, just the on premises by itself. 3-2 city is 44, county is 7. Is 7. 7. Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem. I almost said 77, but it's actually 7.
Right.
And then your combo on off single license that does both on and off. City is 41. County is 28.
69.
So all those should add up to 1,564. If my report did it right. Yes, Gene?
Could you explain to us the on/off premise 3-2? What does that allow them to do that a 3-2 couldn't do? That are off premise.
A 3-2 on and off premises allows you to serve both for on premises consumption, which means draft, cans, bottles opened that are opened. And then if you decide to leave with a sealed container that you purchase, like a 6-pack to go, you can do both. It's a combination license, allows you to do both.
Can you give us an example of what type of business might have one of those?
The majority of them are Pizza Huts.
So can they deliver? Can they deliver a 6?
On, off can deliver, yes. If you have a 3-2 on, off, you can. No other 3-2 license can deliver, just the on-off combo. So if you have a 3-2 off only, like a convenience store, grocery store, you can't deliver. There have been some entities that only sell off premises that have decided to get the on-off combo so they can deliver. Even though there is no on, they have that combo license to be able to deliver 3-2.
So if that's a fermented malt beverage license, and if it wasn't changed, you could envision, let's pick on somebody who isn't here. Hy-Vee comes to Colorado. They apply for a on and off premise 3-2 license. January 1, 2019, if there's no legislation, you now have a grocery store that could have a beer bar and deliver off-premise, have a beer bar on-premise, an off-premise license for people to take it home, plus they can deliver, right?
Yes.
Gene, so I just pulled off the list of liquor licenses from the lady's website. 3-2 on are the Pizza Huts. The 3-2 on-offs look like a lot of different things, including pool halls, come and goes, Walmarts, and a bunch of other types of places. So it's a broad scale of businesses that currently have those licenses.
So the
Are there any pizza huts that have both? I thought there was
They
some.
used to.
The on-off, 3-2 on-off doesn't look like there's a single
Oh, my bad.
Pizza Hut that has that, but I mean, that's irrelevant. It's a broad scale of different types of businesses that have the 3-2 on-off, including traditional on-premise and what you would assume to be traditional off-premise.
Bruce?
Actually, I looked at that list too, cause I was curious about it, and there are a lot of golf courses, marinas, ranches, a lot of sort of, there was a park and rec district down there, there's a lot of sort of activity-oriented things. But if we're going to talk about 3-2 going away, and the possibility that you would have an establishment that's both a bar and a package store, I think there's some public safety and I would assume regulatory concerns with that. Or if, as a state, we're gonna move that direction, then does that mean that liquor stores would start opening bars and bars would start opening liquor stores and we'd be selling and drinking liquor everywhere? It doesn't feel to me like it's consistent with the rest of our current regulatory scheme to even have that on-off premise license if we're talking about malt liquor.
I'll just throw it out there, a beer wholesaler is allowed to do that. So a beer wholesaler is allowed to have on-premise and off-premise consumption. So it does exist. I'm not saying which way it should land, but that does exist in the current licensing structure.
And that's how taprooms, whoever's gonna operate taprooms is with a wholesale license.
Let's get a wholesale license then. Cool.
And there's 285 wholesale beer licenses. That's just the wholesale. And then there are, at this point, 172 registered sales rooms for tap rooms. That's probably a little bit higher because some were to self-report when the law changed back in 2015. I think some probably have not yet. And we're still flushing those out, but we have 172 documented malt liquor sales rooms for wholesalers. Some of those let's see, 285 beer wholesalers are traditionally just a beer, they have no sales room at all. Some of them are like that. Andrew.
Sorry I was late, so I may have missed this earlier. The entire working group and the subgroup is made up of lots of members. I'm the official working group Department of Revenue and Liquor Enforcement are one of those seats. And I incredibly appreciate the fact that you've been running this as a group to get industry input. And maybe this happened earlier, maybe I just missed it, but it sort of occurred to me that I don't think we've heard what your preference might be, or the division's preference might be for what happens with fermented malt beverages.
I have provided my input about my public safety issues about public consumption. I did bring one up and you weren't here when we missed a part about the 3-2 manufacturer wholesale license. Doesn't make any sense to still have them. Why have two licenses to make the same product? I really defer to the locals as far as needs and desires. I do have a public safety concern of having a beer bar within 500 foot of a school. As a public policy, but I really would like to have the locals champion that because that's really more of a local issue. But from a statewide issue, it does concern me. That's what's the law. But again, the locals have the ability to control that. They can waive it. They can do that. So I really, even though I do have concern, I'm going to really weigh heavily on the locals to be able to just provide input from the licensing standpoint on that. As far as whether it changes automatically overnight, I'm neutral on that. From an enforcement standpoint, whatever it turns out to be, I'll request additional FT if I need to. If we feel it, more enforcement has to occur, more licensing has to occur. We've already built in some of that into the fiscal note when 197 was built. So we have that built up in the next 3 years as far as staff of what we know. But if it changes, we'll modify that. But from an industry standpoint of whether it should be a licensing or it should not be a licensing, Andrew, really, I'm neutral on that. Gene?
What is your thoughts about the financial interest component to both statutes? Because what would, with the financial interest, if you own a 3-2 fermented malt beverage license, you can also own what?
Pretty much anything else.
But if you're a retail liquor store selling fermented malt beverage, what can you have financial interest in? Not much.
Fermented malt beverage, public transportation, and I think arts.
So, I think what I'm trying to point out, there are several things, guidelines, restrictions, prohibitions, do's and do nots in 47, which are not in 46. Correct?
Yeah.
So I think those are things that have to be looked at as well. As Adam said, I don't think we can continue along with a 46, 47 combo. I think it's got to be, we would like those who sell the same product that we sell to live by the same rules that we do.
You know, and
For
with.
the record, I don't know if I said that, Gene.
No, you didn't say that, but you did say.
Okay, just for the record, I don't think I said that.
You know, and I've been not like overly vocal, but I've expressed my concern of opening this up does open to more potential abuse of trade practice. That's why we're starting a new unit to do investigative and trade practice issues. So we recognize that fact. When you bring a lot more players into the realm of regulation of malt liquor, the potential for abuse definitely increases. So we definitely have that in mind, and we'll be keeping track of that.
I don't necessarily disagree with Gene either. Maybe not for all the same reasons, but the whole reason that you have 3-2 in a different article is because it was different. It was different stuff.
Yeah.
It's different product, and it's not going to be. And it may be, there may be some bumpy parts about bringing them together into one article, but I think, especially given the time before January 1, 2019, maybe not before legislation is necessary, but given the time and stuff, there's time to do it right.
We're not at the 11th hour. We're not, we do have the time to
We've
really.
done that before with, other substances. So it's ultimately doable. I guess maybe one of the key questions first is setting aside some of the bumpy parts or exceptions that may have to be made, or question on if grandfathering certain things might have to, is there, one of the, I guess maybe the key question, is there at least some consensus that keeping fermented malt beverages and every other license in separate articles may long-term create more issues than it resolves, and should they be brought together? I would advocate for bringing them together and then figuring out how to make the puzzle pieces fit.
So from a higher perspective, and you say bring them together, and we're talking more.
The same article.
Yeah, it has to be in the same article, but I think, are you sort of like what Gene said, that since they are the same product, they should maybe have the same regulation scheme?
Why not, going forward? The question is, what do you do, the big related question is, what do you do with existing licenses where some of those inconsistencies between the two exist? Are they, I guess the ultimate is, the death penalty, because there's something that happened, they can lose their license, versus do you do nothing, they can continue operating as is.
Right. So am I hearing a little bit tinge of not an agreement, but the thought of this group, and I want opposition to definitely speak up, the idea that since they are the same product, treating them as a regulated product the same fashion, no matter what article it's in, doesn't matter. But it is true that fermented malt beverage is regulated totally different than malt liquor. When you combine them, it does make sense that they do have the same regulations, no matter how you write that up. Bruce.
I think that's one interesting path, although, not to speak for anyone else, but just kind of going back to last spring in our conversations, I think there's some sort of fundamental parts of the regulations that retail liquor stores live with that we heard from our friends on the 3-2 side that they did not want to be bound by. And so it kind of, I think, we're gonna be at a fork in the road where I think it is either if you really wanna have all the same products and same thing, the rules should be the same. But if not, the other path to consider, the other fork in the road would be, and we talked about this last spring and almost did this, to create a new kind of license that replaces the 3-2 license. At one point, it was suggested be called a packaged beer license that defines some lesser universe of products that still constitute real beer, but it's not the entire universe of malt liquor, and it doesn't really facilitate turning convenience stores and grocery stores into malt liquor stores, which I don't think was the intention, and from our perspective is not desirable.
Okay. I know we don't have a whole lot of convenience stores. I would expect them to have some opinion on this, so. Steve.
I apologize if I'm late, but what's our, we talked about this earlier, what's our process now for going forward? Do you want us to start submitting language,
I would really like to get the groups that are some main players. I say main, I just mean people who are outside of this room to meet and see if they can come up with some agreement or some, we can sit here all day long with 30, 40 people and discuss the ideas. We're not gonna get that nuts and bolts done. But concept, I really wanna talk about concepts here, what does a concept look like, like for example, should someone who has a 3-2 license on December 31st, 2018 still have a liquor license January 1st of 2019 because of what Senate Bill 197 did? Just that premise alone, where do we stand, And then we go to, okay, should there be application process? There's a grandfather, I'm really looking at the high level philosophies for this group, and then I think individually we break off and we hash it out. I say we, not necessarily me, isn't that we, but you hash that out. I'll be glad to be there to mediate. To come up with some of those nuts and bolts, because there are some differences here. I do believe we can bridge those differences. I really do. I think there's a way to get it done. I don't think anyone's going to get their desired, just like 197, nobody got everything they wanted. The same ideas coming out of this, I don't think everybody's going to get everything they wanted, but I think we'll get a lot of what we want. So that's my thought of the process, and I'm not necessarily one to tell you how to do it. I'm open to other ideas. The fact is, come like next September, October, Lisa's going to write this report. And what we give her is what she's going to write. What does this group want that report to look like? Are we still be in September of next year arguing with each other? My answer would be no. We don't want that. We need to lay the groundwork now, not wait till summer to try to get it done. We start making now so we're not in an 11th hour situation like other situations are. That's my desire. But I'm only one idea. I'm only one person. I'm open to other ideas on how to get this done. This isn't the LED telling you what to do. It's recommending things, but if there's other ideas, I'm totally open to it.
conversation going?
Go for it.
I guess I'd kinda like to, explore maybe a little bit more the concept Jean was bringing up, where I think she's kinda talking a little bit about trying to bring, as we bring convenience stores on, trying to create some parity between what their requirements are, in terms of sales of malt liquor and what a retail store has. So, I guess the question I have is what's wrong with, what kind of complexities might we face if we instill those same requirements? Is it gonna be the, financial disclosures or financial interests? What are the things we're gonna need to tackle that are gonna make that process more difficult so we can start, that's the high level stuff I think we're talking about here, right? Convenience stores, I don't know if we have some.
I'm here, I wonder, are we separating convenience stores from grocery stores, or?
Yeah, I think we're just, well, no, not necessarily. I mean, we're talking about, I think, in a broader sense, what a convenience store and grocery stores can sell 3-2 right now. What if we put the same type of restrictions on sales of malt liquor at convenience stores and grocery stores? What complexities is that gonna create for you? And where do we start to run into roadblocks? And financial interests, I think, is probably a pretty good example of that. What else?
I probably can't answer that right now.
Okay.
I mean, the implication there is if you treat them exactly the same, there's that, prohibited financial interest between the liquor stores, liquor licensed drugstores. If you include fermented malt beverage or a box store like that, then all of a sudden now, that would, totally change things to where, you can only have, next year 5 liquor licensed drugstores, or something that, you're unlimited as a liquor licensed drugstore, retail liquor store, you still can have as many 3-2 as you want. If you fold them into that same philosophy, if you can't, you're not really totally limiting the ability to expand and to have that license. So I guess my assumption is you don't wanna change that.
And I think the other big prohibition would be the on-premise consumption license, right? Because a retail liquor store, you're not allowed to have an interest in anything other than a 3-2, same with the drugstore liquor store. But the 3-2s would be then allowed to have an interest in an on-premise consumption tavern, restaurant or something like that, is that correct?
No.
No?
Through the 3-2 on license, they would.
What about some saying a holder of a 3-2? Are they prohibited from having any interest in an on-premise?
No.
That's what I mean, but retail liquor stores are.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so the converse of owning a retail liquor store or a drugstore liquor store, you're not allowed to have an interest in an on-premise consumption like a restaurant, bar, resort, pick one. Versus if you're just a 3-2 licensee, then you're allowed to have an interest in all those as well. So that's what you're talking about, Liz.
Yeah, I think it's almost worth going down the list and start from, what if we said all of the exact same restrictions apply? Let's look at those restrictions and go down the list of restrictions that I think are in 46, and see how they would apply. Am I wrong about that, Patrick? But look at all of them that exist for retail stores right now for the sale of malt liquor, and then see when we start going down that list, which ones are going to be sticking points for convenience stores and grocery stores if they're gonna convert to the malt beverage.
There's not a whole lot of them.
So what are they?
You got the financial interest, you have the 20% food, or 20% non-alcohol products sell for a retail liquor store. And the financial interest is the ownership piece.
Distance.
Age of employees.
Age of employees.
Is distance one?
Distance requirement.
I'm looking at that multiple interest grid. I don't know if you did it,
The what? The what?
Multiple interest grid that somebody at the division did. If we could get something like that, make up a grid of, kind of see what we're looking at. It'd be nice if we had it on here, kind of piecing the puzzle together, see, yeah. I can send it out, but that was, I don't know if you did that division or.
No, it's on the website. It's somebody did it in 2009. It does
Okay.
need to be updated because it has changed with 197.
But that'd be a good
There are
place to
some things,
kinda-
but yeah, I'm aware of this grid. I think it's a useful thing, and I do think that it should be updated, and then that is a starting point for kind of getting a schematic of the lay of the land,
Yeah.
so.
Patrick, would it be helpful also to have a similar grid for the requirements to hold a retail liquor license and or restrictions, and the requirements to hold a
Yeah.
3-2
You got one that came up.
that?
Yeah.
I think that's right.
Do
and
a
then-
table that
Right.
just puts
So
them
you
right
can
next to each other.
Visualize
Yeah.
what the magnitude of the difference.
One point I think it's important to keep in mind is just what's the core businesses that we're talking about. And grocery and convenience stores are at their core a different kind of business than a retail liquor store is in terms of what their principal purpose is. And so a convenience store, if it's really a convenience store, the alcohol sales are really an accessory part of a larger business that's not primarily about selling alcohol. Same thing with a grocery store. A liquor store, it's primarily about selling alcohol. And even with the loosened restrictions on the list of products from 197, there was a pretty tight limit put on what other products could be sold to kind of maintain that fundamental character of the business. And I think it's going to be important when we talk about the rules that apply or the boundaries that apply to grocery and convenience stores, that what the business is at its core is still respected and kept the same, and that we don't just turn them into another category of liquor store.
How do you think we best do that? You got any thoughts?
Well, one of the conversations last spring was limiting the amount of alcohol that could be sold, whether by percentage of sales, whether by lineal feet of sales area, number of cooler doors, that type of thing. I believe some other states do that. It could also be by limiting what products. So maybe real beers below some ABV, but not the high alcohol malt liquors. Maybe not all the alcopops and other kinds of things that raise all the public safety concerns when they're being sold in a very less controlled environment, where children work, where children shop.
Okay.
But going along the same line, in my mind though, the difference that the Senate Bill 197 made was, the difference is that those carry beer and those don't carry refined spirits. And that's the difference.
But alcohol is alcohol is alcohol, regardless of what form
But
it
a
comes
malt
in.
beverage is different than a distilled spirits and a spirits. And the eyes of the statute, together.
Not anymore.
Yeah, I see it a little differently in that we just didn't get the beer issue solved, so it was a punt. But I don't think the intention of the bill sponsors was to say that this could never be considered or broken down. And in fact, it was one of the things that we talked about, and had we had more time, it might have been part of the bill.
Yeah, we talked, and we were there when we talked about it, and we disagree with that now. We disagree with that now, putting limits on it, on number of cooler doors and things like that.
And so your position is you feel like all malt liquors, regardless of ABV, should be included?
In the eyes of the statute, yes it is.
I'm not asking about the statute.
Well, that's what we're talking about. No, I mean, we.
I'm talking about your position. So all malt liquors with no limits, that's what you're saying is your position?
I'm saying that's what the bill says, all malt liquors is.
So Steve, am I understanding you correctly then, when we start talking about, like, one of the disparities we identified is the 20% sales that you are allowed on outside of alcohol sales, right? 25%, and what you're almost kind of recommending is reversing that a little bit and saying that a convenience store can't, a total percentage of their sales can't be more than X percentage, or a a certain amount of space. Steve, am I hearing you saying you're saying there should be no limitations on that?
No, it should not.
Okay. Anybody else have, because this is a really good area for, this sounds to me like this would be one of the sticking points. Anybody else have any thoughts on that from, the stakeholder groups? I think what we're trying to talk about is, in the big picture, we're talking about trying to see where we can find parity between, retail stores and those that are gonna be converting from 3-2 sales to something bigger than that. So that's kind of the big topic, and then we kind of narrowed it down to, what type of limits, if we were going to do like a limit on sales or a limit on space or something like that, what are some other ideas that might be, that folks might have that, they want to voice here? I know we've got a lot of stakeholders here that have a stake in this, so. You're gonna look into it, the convenience store side?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about it, I think, just maybe, like, maybe just, maybe just send me a list and I can provide some comments to you on where you see the rough, where we would see some rough points. I'm not gonna sit here like in open forum and give you kind of top of my head types of stuff. I don't think that's appropriate, so. But if we can go through the statute and find where that might be rough points between 46 and 47.
Well, I don't wanna put you on the spot now, I think that's fair, but at some point we wanna have that conversation.
Sure.
I mean, that's what the group is formed for, is for us to have those kind of conversations and kind of see where people stand and see where we can kind of strike that balance.
I'm Tatsi Reese, and I represent Diamond Shamrock and 7-Eleven, and I would love to take that back to them. Just
Okay.
that, wasn't prepared for that today.
Okay. So then, so if we don't have a lot of thought then on the 20% or some sort of limit on sales, what was the one that was brought up with age of employees?
21 means
Yeah.
21.
Well, age of employee for retail liquor store is 21, age of employee for, from a malt beverage is 18.
All right, so how do we fix that? How do we bring parity there?
21.
Some other thoughts on that?
I don't think it's something that we're in love with, but I think we can probably live with that.
Okay.
It is a little difficult in rural areas for some of our stores to follow that, but, we're still discussing that as a convenience, in the convenience store industry. We had a conference call last week about all of this, and we're trying to get on the same page with everybody in the industry, and we're working on a lot of things that you all asked Greer to go back to his group. We're trying to figure out how to bring everybody together, so we just need a little bit more time.
Okay. But so I think Ron brought up a point a few minutes ago, and maybe this would be helpful as we talk about these things, we're tabling them for later conversation. Again, I like the idea, and I'm not sure what this is gonna look like, because I'm not as familiar with the law as Patrick is, but kind of a chart that shows here's some of the requirements on malt liquor sales for retail stores, here's some of them on convenience stores. Here's where, I think what we're asking for when we talk about parity, we're talking about some sort of competitive, level playing field competitively, right? And so maybe if we can put that out visually and get it out to the group, then you guys can take it back to your respective, contingencies, and but the goal is to have the conversation here, right? And to make sure that we're able to kind of voice our thoughts, because we really need feedback from all of you in this forum, so we can everyone can respond back and forth to it, so we can get the information we need to be able to put some meaningful dialogue together in a report. Does that sound like a good next step for us on that one? Okay, because otherwise if it gets quiet again, I'm gonna bring bad jokes next time, that's how.
And they're not good.
I answered most of them.
We will drop a document that compares retail liquor store regs and policy versus 3-2. We can do that. and get that out next week. So if you're not on the email distribution list, you won't get it. So as another plug to get on the email distribution list, go to our website and sign up for the this working group. Because it's true, next September looks like a long time away, but it's going to be here before you know it. So.
Patrick, I think it would be important when you put that list together that you include any advantages, if you will, or restrictions that a 3.2 on/off-premise licensee has. Not just an off-premise 3.2, but an on and an on-off. I think we need to see
I
the
agree.
whole
Oh, yeah.
picture.
This is 3.2 as a whole, not.
Right, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, they are two different models. One's I agree with Bruce. A retail liquor store is a business model versus a convenience store versus a grocery store. They do have different objectives and goals, as far as the customers they serve and how they serve. So I don't know if you can actually bring them in total 100% parity on some of these things. Maybe you can. Maybe not. Anybody else want to chime in on this? I think between now and next month, which is December 13th, is the next meeting. I think it's 13th. We really need to have, dialogue in the next meeting. Just not, we'll take it back. We need to actually bring something to the table. Doesn't have to be a recommendation, but bring some discussion. We'll make that available next week, early next week. The comparison side by side, 3.2 versus malt liquor. Anybody from the grocery stores want to chime in as far as their thoughts? Larry?
Certainly, I wasn't sure Target or Walmart were here, so I didn't want to. I know they're the formal members of the committee.
Well, subgroups are open to everybody, so there's no formality necessarily. We can talk. Really, that's why we open the subgroups to anybody and everybody, because the number of people of the working group members were limited by statute. So that's why we open the subgroups up to everybody. So we definitely want to hear from you in this forum.
I think, based on, we would support what CNL is saying, and certainly beer distributors were not really interested in exploring a new license, understanding that there is some language about some of the responsibilities of the statutory committee, and I think we said that at the last meeting. That said, I know there's been some concerns raised around when 2019 comes and
Margaret, did you have any comments?
I'm just standing in for Lloyd, so I'm just taking notes to get it back to him.
Okay.
But I'm sure he will.
So, what I see is going forward, the next meeting, we'll have some good dialogue on the differences between 3.2 and a retail liquor store. I mean, so I guess ready to bring some good dialogue about that. I don't see how we can make them equal. I mean, they're not equal businesses. But I think there are some ways we can address those inequalities to make them more in line with what the statute is looking at and where we're going as an industry in Colorado. We are opening up beer sales in bigger venues. That's the law does allow that. How that looks, it's a different business model. Colorado is definitely changing the way alcohol is being sold. So, there is differences to be made, I guess. It's not status quo anymore. So, this group, I think, is really part of our charges is how's that going to look in the future. And it's definitely not status quo.
How soon do you think we can get that table out?
What's today, Wednesday?
Yeah. Could we get it out a week or two before the next meeting?
Next week at the latest.
Okay. So we'll get this table out to everyone that kind of compares and contrasts the two types of licenses. And I think our assignment to you guys is go back to your groups and really critically think about those things and the differences between them and what you could or couldn't live with as it relates to each of those topics. Because I think at the next meeting, a good starting point is for us to just work through it and have discussion on each of those things and see if we can reach some consensus on some things. So we'll get that out to you. But your homework assignment is take it back to your folks and have some internal discussions so that at the next meeting we can have this more lively discussion about each of the topics.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention the last meeting I talked about how we need to reschedule, or not reschedule, but schedule next year's meetings. I do expect to have a meeting every month starting in January. Again, the same structure we've had in the last few months. In January would be the subgroups and the main group, and then alternating every other month with the main group not just meeting every other month. The subgroups meet every month. We'll probably leave that decision scheduling up to this afternoon's 3 o'clock meeting, but if you have any ideas and you think you're not going to be here at 3 o'clock, with the legislative session coming in, I need some good suggestions on what day of the week to have that meeting. If we're going to have the same format like we do today, it's an all-day, one-day meeting, or do we split it up again to meet scheduling, or do we keep it one day? If you're not going to be here at 3, I'd like to hear your suggestions, because we really don't want to wait till next month to get some of those meetings scheduled, because location. Oh, and next month I'm trying to get a meeting room downtown. Okay, so nothing against this wonderful room. I appreciate Department of Agriculture giving us this, and it's a great place for me to come because it's close to home. But I'm looking for somewhere downtown next month. So, Joni.
I don't know how everyone else feels, but for those of us that are at the Capitol, if during session, if you could have those at the Supreme Court or even at the Capitol, whatever, and we actually have an office with a lot of room. So, there's options there, but this would be really difficult during session, especially if it's snowy or whatever.
I don't expect to have it here during session. But more importantly, what does a schedule look like during session? I'm confident we'll get a place downtown to get us during session, but what's the schedule look like? I mean, I'm hearing from you guys, Monday through Thursday is pretty much out because, even for me and Ron and Lewis, because, it's hit or miss on any day of the week between, January and May. So do I hear Friday? I mean, but I keep on getting crucified for Friday 2 o'clock meetings. But if this group decides on that, it's not my decision. Andrew?
I would recommend no matter what day of the week or time we do it, that we figure out a robust telephonic option. Because, I mean, some of us, especially for some of us who maybe don't even need to provide input, but are here listening and paying attention. Not necessarily me, I talk a lot. And I think some of our on-premises friends, when we're talking about mostly off-premises things.
Well taken. Bruce?
I suggest also maybe tightening up the schedule and starting an hour later for those that are traveling, especially if we're going downtown. It'd be great to be starting at 9 rather than 8 once we get the weather and so forth.
I think on those days we have just the subgroups probably. I'm not sure if that, I'm open to suggestions on the days we have all 4 meetings, 3 subgroups in the main meeting. Are we gonna give us enough time for that? I don't know, maybe we can, I'm fine with that.
If we eliminate all the silent time, we'll have lots of extra time.
I am not in control of that. I could be. So, I still haven't heard days of the week yet. I mean, are we pretty much stuck to Fridays?
Sunday.
Friday. Ignore him on that one.
What did he say?
I think no matter what day you pick, someone's gonna have a conflict, so even during the session, even on Fridays, it's committees or whatever, I think you go on a Friday, I don't like Fridays, cause people get out of town and don't wanna meet, I think it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and if someone can't make it, they can send a substitute or whatever.
So for those of you down there that didn't hear me, Kevin said Friday is not the best. No matter what day we pick during session, it's not gonna be good for everybody. And that, if you can't be there, send a proxy or send somebody else, but pick the other day besides Friday. I'm getting input for the 3 o'clock meeting, by the way. That's why we're doing this. We're not making a decision. I'm just getting input for 3 o'clock, so. Okay. Anything else I missed before we take a little break? Okay, back here at 10:15 for number 2. Trade practice.
15 or 10?
Oh, 10.
10.
I'm sorry, 10.
We're back here in 15.
We're back here in 15.
Nice to meet you. Take care.
I don't know